I remember back in the good old days, I don't know if they were good old days or not, but I remember way back when we had very small children. In fact, I remember before we had our third child, and it was a crazy time in our life. I was going to seminary at the time, and I was trying to do it full time so that I could not be in it forever and ever and ever. I was also, in order to make money, in order to pay for this whole thing, I was working 32 hours a week, teaching out in Eden Prairie, so it was 22 miles one way. And then I was also working at Bethlehem Baptist Church as an intern there. So I was an intern just like many of you all have been or will be, hopefully. So you add that all up, and it was just this crazy, crazy time in our lives. If you've ever been driving on Summit Avenue and you keep going straight towards St. Paul, and it kind of merges then in with the Grand Avenue, you'll notice some huge mansions, right? You'll see these mansions that are up there. One of those places, I have no idea which place it was. I went and looked for it this morning. This is just a mansion on Summit Avenue. But no, it's not. It's the exact right one. I did find it. No, I'm just kidding. I did not. We had found out about a place, Carol and I, where we could go and take a retreat. I think it was like $10, and it was a retreat in one of these places. You could spend 24 hours in one of these places for like $10 each. Each got your own room. All you got to eat was soup. And the kicker of the thing was this. It was silent. It was silent. It was a silent retreat. Anybody ever been on a silent retreat? Yeah. It's interesting. When you're going a million miles an hour and all of a sudden you walk into this place and everybody's quiet, nobody's talking, which obviously would be the reason for a silent retreat. And you go in there and it's quiet. And you go to your room and there are no electronic devices allowed. You can't bring anything in there. There's no radio or anything. And silence is loud. It is loud. I mean, for the first hour or two, I thought, the only way I'm going to keep my sanity here is if I can take a nap. Because I'm good with that kind of silence, actually. I'm pretty good with that. It actually was creeping me out for quite a while. This lack of activity of just sitting there, me and a Bible and a notebook in this room, and it is quiet. Can't hear anything from outside or inside. It's almost deafening in your ears. Like Tim mentioned, that's the way Israel would have felt. If you're brand new to the Bible, you'll notice that there's an Old Testament and a New Testament. The last book of the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, has the last chapter, has 6 verses to you. And I want to read these 6 verses. This is it. This is the end of the Old Testament. It says, "Surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and that day is coming and will set them on fire, says the Lord Almighty." You got to understand, at this time in the history of Israel, it has been taken out of their nation. They've been spread out all over the place in the exile, and they are waiting. They are waiting for God to show up. And here this promise is, "Not a root or branch will be left to them, but for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its wings." That is an awesome phrase, right? So it's like night, it's pitch dark, and the promise is, for you who revere my name, something's going to happen. What? You're going to start to see the sunrise, and it's going to come, and it's going to rise. And then, in typical prophet fashion, I'm going to completely change the metaphor, and it's got wings now. Okay? It does. And it's got healing in those wings. And it says, and now to change the metaphor again, "And you will go out and leap like calves released from their stall." Or, if you own a beagle, once it gets outside your gate, yeah! Yes! Freedom, right? For all those you own beagles. "Then you will trample down the wicked. They will be ashes under the soles of your feet on the day when I do these things, says the Lord Almighty. Remember the law of my servant Moses, the decrees and laws I give at Oreb for all Israel. See, I will send you the prophet Elijah before that great and dreadful day of the Lord comes. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to their children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. Here's this passage. It's an amazing promise in this time of silence, or this time when they're waiting for God to do something, and you think, this is awesome, and then what happens? 400 years of silence. That was 20 seconds of silence. People are at Hope West going, it's broken. Hey, dude, fix it. It's broken. They're not coming through. That was 20 seconds of silence. That's 1/2 a second for every 10 years of silence they felt. Nothing happens. This day never comes. And today when we read this story that we're going to read today, the silence is broken. We're in a series right now on the Gospel of Luke. If you have a Bible with you, open it up to the Gospel of Luke. You can either go there electronically. You can open up the insert that's in the middle of your worship folder. We'll be looking at verses 5 through 25 for today of the first chapter. If you were not here last week, we kicked off a series in the Gospel of Luke. Tim is taking bets that this will take us 3 years. I don't think so, but then again, I thought we could do this place for half the cost. So then again, there is that. Last week, we kicked off the Gospel of Luke. We read the first 4 verses, and it was a unique time to look at kind of an intro to the whole book. If you haven't had a chance, I'd encourage you to listen to that message if you just get a framework of the Gospel of Luke. We said that the book was written to a person. This person was the name Theophilus. There's some things that we think he was. We know he was we believe, at least we know this name for sure, is a Greek or a non-Jewish name. It was written by a guy by the name of Luke. We spent some time, significant amount of time last week looking at that. Here's the different thing he was. He also was a non-Jew, which is amazing. Amazing when you start reading like passages like today and as we go through. Luke loves the Old Testament, but he's not a native to it. He didn't grow up in it. But you're going to see this all over the place in Luke. He's a historian, he's a theologian, he's a doctor, he's definitely a pastor, he's a good friend, and he's also a musician. There's many songs in it. Today we're talking about not silent anymore. The silence is broken by a birth announcement of J the Bee. If you know anything about John the Baptist, I love this guy. I love John the Baptist. We're not going to get there yet because he's not going to be born yet, but I love it. What I want to do is many of you may not be familiar with this passage. A lot of times I'm just going to read through the passage one time as we go through it, but today I'm going to read it through just once through, and then we'll go through and kind of make some comments along the way. The interesting thing is this is a Luke exclusive. This is a Luke exclusive. No other gospel has this account, and no other church is talking about this. So this is a Hope exclusive. I have no idea. Maybe not. So let's read it through. Luke 1, verses 5 through 25. In the time of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, or if you have a older version, it'll say Zacharias, same name, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the customs of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And he will go on before the Lord in the spirit of and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and will not be able to speak until this day happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he had kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." Okay, so sometimes you got to read the Bible as like you're the first reader, okay? And that helps you put things in a little bit more of the perspective. Not only the first reader, but as if the events were happening while you were standing there, okay? So you got all this silence happening, and then all of a sudden, Luke says he's going to write an orderly account, and the next thing we go, and boom, we meet two people. We meet Zechariah and Elizabeth. So let's take a look at them real quick here. Verses 5 to 7. Zechariah and Elizabeth. There's a few things in here you should know just historically. And again, Luke is a historian. His historical facts are incredibly accurate. He's right on. We looked at this last week. As a historian, he lacks nothing. It says at the time of Herod, king of Judea. That was between the years 37 and 4 BC. So the old joke we like to, Tim even cracked it there in the service over here at East, but was that they were counting backwards to 0. Actually, it probably was around 4 BC. There's an error in the, I don't know, some guy ran out of fingers or toes or something, and they didn't get it exactly right, the 0. But you're within 4 years. That's pretty good when you're going backwards, especially. Anyway, so he served around that time. So this happens about 5 or 4 BC. We know that for a fact. It says there's a person who's a priest. His name is Zechariah. Okay? He's only mentioned here in Luke. We don't know a whole bunch more about him than what is mentioned in just our passage here, and then we'll see him in a couple weeks. We'll see him again. He belonged to this priestly division of Abijah. So now, here's the deal. We're not sure exactly how many, but there was about 8,000 to 10,000 or so priests that were serving in different capacities throughout Palestine at that time. What they were is they were broken down into 24 different divisions. All right, and so you had all these priests, and some scholars have said around 300 per division. I never did the math at 8,000 or so. That adds up to or something like that. So, and then there were priests doing other things, but there were 24 different divisions of these priests. There's 300 in each division. He was one of those. His division was called of the tribe of Abijah. Now, those different divisions served at the temple in 1 week periods twice a year. All right? So your division of 300 could serve at the temple twice a year, one time. Then that adds up to 48. For those of you who 2 times 24 is 48. That leaves a few weeks. Those were the special events like Passover and different feasts and things, and all hands on deck. All of the priests would be there for when everybody was in town to celebrate these things. Okay, now we're also going to meet Elizabeth. She also was a descendant of Aaron, which means she would be in the priestly tribe. She doesn't need to be. A priest doesn't need to marry another person who's in that wing, but that's okay. He did, and it kind of says something more about him. What else do we learn about them? They're righteous folk. Righteous folk. They wow. They're righteous people, right? They even explain what that means, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. They were followers of God. They were people who sought after him very much, but there was a problem. Here's the problem. They were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive. That's what it says. And they were both very old, or well advanced in years, some of your versions say. Now, what does very old mean? I used to think very old was 50. 50 is not very old anymore. 50 is very young. I just looked at someone who's very young like, no, 50 is very old. She's saying to me, aren't you? Yeah. So, no, but it's beyond the age when you would, have children. 300, I'm thinking is very old. So, at least that's my story. Now I'm saying. Now, let's keep going in our story. Look what happens. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot. Okay? So there's 300 people in this deal, and he got the lot. That's a huge deal. He was going to be the one that was going to go into the temple, and he was going to burn incense and pray. And what they did is they prayed on behalf of the people of Israel. They did this every day. It was part of the deal twice a day, but he got that opportunity. Now, I might think, well, given those odds, you probably would get that over the course of a career. Potentially, but you got to realize it wasn't 300 always. There's always new people coming on, right? And people retiring and whatever the other end. So to get this, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Listen to what Kent Hughes says about this. Oh, one more detail you should see. Time of burning incense came. He goes into the temple, and all the other people are outside, and they're in this courtyard. I'll show you a picture in just a second what that looks like. Listen to what Kent Hughes. It says that's not what it's supposed to say. It is supposed to say, it is supposed to say that. My bad. Mishnah states that before each of the 2 daily services, 4 sets of lots were used to determine the participants. In this case, the incense lot finally fell to Zechariah. And in an instant, he was at the apex of his personal history. The honor of offering incense was the grandest event in all his earthly existence. This is a career day. Many priests never had the privilege, and no priest was allowed to offer it more than once. Zechariah's adrenaline began to flow, and with it came the alert attention that notes every detail. What joy he would have in telling Elizabeth, right? Zechariah was serving God with his cohorts in the heart of the gleaming temple, in the court of the priests where the sacrifice was to be made. Outside, in the court of Israel, faithful worshipers were praying. Then came the moment to step up to the holy place. Before him rose the richly embroidered curtain of the Holy of Holies, resplendent with cherubim, woven in scarlet, blue, purple, and gold. To his left was the table of showbread. Directly in front of him was the horned golden altar of incense. To his right stood the golden candlestick. Zechariah purified the altar and waited joyously for the signal to offer up the incense, so that, if it were, the sacrifices went up to God, wrapped in the sweet incense of prayer. This was a huge deal to be able to go into the holy place. Now, if you're not familiar with all the temple, this is actually a model that is built. It's in Jerusalem. They have kind of the whole city, what first century Jerusalem would look like. This is a model of what the temple would have looked like, kind of the big box there. That's the actual area. You would go into that area, the holy place. There was a special area called the Holy of Holies, and only once a year on Yom Kippur would the high priest be able to go in there. But he was right on the other end of this, and he was offering his prayer of incense. And actually, I just found this. It's kind of interesting. But this is what his little shovel would have looked like. How do you carry incense? I guess that's the shovel. They found it. No, they didn't. But they found one in 2nd century Rome, and so this is what it would have looked like. You can't underscore enough how big of a deal this would have been to Zechariah. This was huge, not only in his career, but in his relationship with God. Look at what Joel Green has to say about this. He says, the honor reserved for Zechariah is symbolized in the spatial markers Luke employs. Zechariah goes into the sanctuary and the people remain outside. This language underscores the separation of people by status as measured above all by religious purity in Jewish antiquity. In this setting, purity or cleanliness was correlated with holiness, so that the closer one came to the presence of the divine, the more pure one had to be. The altar of incense was located in the sanctuary itself, in the outer chamber of the holy place. On the one side was a curtained doorway leading to the inner chamber of the Holy of Holies. This was the locus of God's glory and could be entered only one day each year, the Day of Atonement, and then only by the high priest. The offering of incense then would bring Zechariah as close to the presence of God as any person other than the high priest might ever come. Many priests might never experience this honor, and it was forever out of the reach of non-priests. It's huge. This is a big day. Let's see what happens on the big day. While this day is happening, this is when the silence gets broken. Verse 11, an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. So just think about this. You're having a moment. I mean, this is a moment. And you're in there, and you're getting to offer incense. This is your time. And all of a sudden, woof, like touched by like an angel or whatever, touched by an angel, the light shines and whatever. It's like, dude. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. Why? Because that doesn't happen often. That never happens. I'm in here alone, and now I'm not. There's a dude here, not a normal dude. This gripped him with incredible fear. Now, we're going to find out in just a little bit that particular angel was an angel by the name of Gabriel. All right? Now, we don't know a ton about Gabriel. He's mentioned one other time in Scripture in the book of Daniel. Daniel is praying as well, and it says this, and I heard a man's voice from the Uli calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. As he, that's Gabriel, came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. And if you can read through Daniel chapter 8 and you get to chapter 9, it's this big prayer that Daniel offers. And then it says, while I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. What they talk about is the 77s and all that kind of fun stuff, and I'll get into that in a little bit later, but not in this sermon. Sorry, but it's a fascinating thing. So Gabriel likes to show up to people when they're offering prayer. He just does. Well, the only two times we have it, those are what's happening. Gabriel says this: every angel in the history of angeldom, the first thing they always say, except for like one or two things, is, hey, don't be afraid, right? Okay, I'm not afraid now. Glad you said that. Thank you. He says this, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Now, that's an interesting thing to say. Your prayer has been heard. The question you'd want to ask is, what prayer? What prayer has been heard? And most scholars think that it's one of two options, right? The first option is that he was praying, I want a child. I want a child. Now, if they were well advanced in years, that prayer most likely would not have been uttered in that time when he's offering incense, right? I mean, chances are they are already resolved with the fact that we're not going to have children. We're elderly or whatever, we're not going to have children. So it could be referring to, we've heard your previous prayers, and now we're going to give you a child here. Could be. But you got to remember, what's he doing in there? Well, he's offering this prayer on behalf of the nation of Israel, right? So he's praying, would you redeem Israel, right? Now, what he's praying probably specifically, and this is not in the passage, you just have to think, what would they be doing in there? They're offering prayers on behalf of Israel, saying, take us out of exile, redeem us back to yourself once again. Now, the answer to both those is going to be, yeah, sure, you betcha, right? I gotcha. But the story kind of gets bigger if you actually see it not just as he's praying for a child, that he potentially also was praying for his entire nation. And Gabriel says, guess what? Your prayer's been heard. Your prayer has been heard. And then he goes on to say this, your wife, Elizabeth, will bear you a son. Bear you a son. And you are to call him John. John is a name that means literally God has shown grace, has been gracious to you, or God has shown favor. That's what that name would have been. And he's to call him John. Keep going on. It says, he will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. Now, that's an awesome thing to say about a child, isn't it? Those of you who have ever had children, joy and delight might not be the first two words that come to my mind. There are wonderful things when you back away from it a number of years, but in the beginning, it's like joy and delight, trouble and hardship and pain and suffering and lack of sleep and anger and frustration and joy and delight. Yes. Yeah, preach now. Come on. Bring it home. It's not that they're not a joy and a delight. It's just there are a lot of things. But it's something about the character of this particular guy. And you know I have a man crush on John the Baptist. So I love this guy. I think he's great. But he would have been a fun guy to be around. He's a joy and a delight. He's also a straight shooter. We'll see that. We'll see that definitely in the Gospel of Luke. But he was just a great guy to be around. Great heart with that. And then it says also, he's not just going to be a great kid. He's going to be great in the sight of the Lord. This kid is going to be something else regarding his spiritual life. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he's born. Now, that is just a weird thing to say, all right? It's even weirder in that culture than in our culture. Like in our culture, in American culture especially, we went through the 1920s where, we had the 21st Amendment repealed it, right? What was the amendment? 19th Amendment was the one that got rid of alcohol. So we have kind of this culture that it's still around to some teetotalers. It means I'm going to be a temperance person. I'm not going to touch alcohol and whatever. That's foreign to most cultures, okay? We have that here. That's certainly not the case in Jewish culture. The Jews had a phrase, when there is no wine, there is no joy, right? So this is a weird thing to say. This is a weird thing to say. Some people think that he's making him a Nazirite, but goes back to the book of Numbers when it talks about making a special vow. He's to be that kid. And it could be, but it doesn't mention the other things, never to cut his hair or other things like that. So there's something different. And I like what Joel Green in his commentary says about this. He says, complete abstinence from wine and other alcoholic beverages is extraordinary in the biblical world. Okay, so I know for us it's like, no big deal. But to them it was like, what? So the requirement that John embrace such ascetic behavior requires explanation. During their period of service in the temple, priests were to abstain from alcoholic beverages. Probably not a bad idea when you go into the holy place, How you doing? No. Abstinence was also integral to those who had been taken a Nazirite vow from Numbers chapter 6. This suggests that refusal to drink wine and beer was associated with separation from normal life for a divine task, whether for a temporary, specific period, priests on duty or the Nazirites, or as in the case of Samson, this is kind of interesting. Now, those of you who are Samson freaks, maybe you remember the Veggie Tales or the flannel graphing kid, for life. He was not allowed to drink alcohol. That lifelong consecration to God is meant, in John's case, is suggested by later reports of his behavior. One may also point to the reminiscences of the Samuel story presented here. See 1 Samuel 1:11. More particularly, this angelic announcement echoes the material related to Samson. For there, an angel announces the conception of a son and requires that the mother not drink wine or strong drink, since he shall be a Nazarite to God from birth. Samson would be instrumental in Israel's deliverance, and later, Samson is empowered by the Spirit of the Lord. By analogy, then, John is set apart by God even from his conception, because it says the Spirit of the Lord is on him now, in that unique way that it was on people in the Old Testament. It's going to happen even now. So, this is awesome. Look at what the ministry of this kid's going to be. So far, what do you got? You got Zechariah, he comes into the temple. He says, banner day. Closest to God, he's close to the presence of God in the temple he's ever going to be, because he's not high priest. This is amazing. In that, he gets this, the silence is broken now. There's a direct revelation from God right there. An angel shows up, announces to him, your prayer's been heard. You're going to have a son. He's going to be a good kid, and he's going to do great things for God. And then he unloads completely onto Zechariah. He says this, he will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord. Now, buckle your seatbelts here, Dorothy. Kansas is going bye-bye in the spirit and power of Elijah. Dude, did you just say that? Yes, he did. It's written down. It's right there. To turn the hearts of their fathers to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Do you remember what I read to you at the beginning? I went back to Malachi here, the last book of the Old Testament. See, I will, when that happens, when this son of righteousness is just going to begin to rise, I'm going to send you someone. Who's it going to be? Elijah. Not really Elijah, but a guy like Elijah, right? Before that great and terrible day. And what's he going to do? Turn the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, or else I will come and strike the land with a curse. Gabriel said that to Zechariah. Does Zechariah know that part of the Old Testament? Yes. How do I know? I know. He did. You don't get the incense thing unless they quote Malachi. All right, I got it. Good. He knew this. He knew the promise. And when Gabriel says that to him, fills his Pampers. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Or it depends, I guess, at that point in time, right? So, hey, I'm almost there. I get to say that. So, this is awesome. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Look at Zechariah's response. He says, oh, I'm sorry. Let me just back up here 1 second. If you didn't pick it up from Gabriel, let me just prove it, because Jesus says it later to make it really clear. He says, to be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things, but I tell you, Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him everything they wished. In the same way, the Son of Man is going to suffer at their hands. Then the disciples understood that he was talking about John the Baptist. I love that verse 13 is an odd-numbered verse, and it gives us the answer right there in the back of the book. Oh, it's John the Baptist, right? This is talking about John the Baptist. So Zechariah's response here, how does he say? He says, how can I be sure of this? I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years. Now, that second sentence is totally true, right? It was told to us in the very beginning of the passage. And they're childless, and he says, how can I be sure of this? What most scholars take this to mean is that Zechariah is saying, can you give me a sign? Now, before you get too hard on Zechariah, you got to give the guy some slack. You got to realize what's happening here. It says, picture old Zechariah. This is Ken Hughes again. He is serving in the heart of the temple. The sacred ambience overwhelms him. The light from the flickering golden candlestick reveals the richly embroidered hues of the cherubim on the veil before the Holy of Holies. The golden altar of incense glistens in the light. The aroma of worship swirls around him. It is the grandest day of his life. Zechariah prays for the redemption of his people, and a supernatural being is there. Cardiac terror. It's a great phrase. Then the being speaks, promising a son whose name evokes the favor of God. He prophesies regarding the son's character, his spiritual formation, and his ministry, invoking the final lines of the Old Testament as his son's script. That Zechariah didn't just say, blah, 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 is amazing. He says something. What he says is stupid, but he says something. So just cut him a little bit of slack. How can I know? Give me a sign. I love how the angel responds. I'm Gabriel. It's just a great phrase. That's just, so far in the Gospel of Luke, that's my 3 favorite words. I am Gabriel. Are you kidding me? You want a sign? I'll give you a sign. I stand in the presence of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and to tell you the good news. And now you're just going to be silent because I can't take any more of this, okay? You're just going to be done until the day it happens because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. Now listen. Zechariah, he gets stricken down for his inability to handle it, right? But it's not really punishment per se. It's again, going back to Joel Green, I love this. He says, Zechariah's science must be above all as a sign. That is, as the proof he requested. You want a sign? Boom, you're not talking. There you go. Now you can know this is going to happen because you wanted a sign. And I think it just shows, I mean, given that amount of data, sensory data happening at that moment, he just went on overload. He just did. All this is taking place in the temple. Listen, what he's supposed to do, he's supposed to go in there, he's supposed to light some incense, say a prayer, and get out. Okay? Where is Zechariah? Meanwhile, the people are waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he was standing so long in the temple. What's going on in there? When he finally came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. I don't know what gang symbol refers to. I just saw a vision, but somehow he was able to do it. So they go, oh, vision. First word sounds like Mission Impossible, Tom Cruise. No, keep going, not a movie, okay? Whatever he was doing works for them. And they realize, oh, he must have had a real vision in there. And then the passage ends up now with Elizabeth. When the time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant. For those of you wondering how this works, he did more than return home for Elizabeth to become pregnant. So, and for 5 months, she remains in seclusion. That's going to be important next week because on the 6th month, something else happens. 5 months, she remains in seclusion. Here's what she says. She doesn't say, how can I know this happened? She just says, the Lord has done this for me. In these days, he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace from among the people. I love the way R.T. France kind of concludes this. He says this, a subsidiary message may also be derived from the experiences of Elizabeth and Zechariah. Elizabeth, in the disgrace of her inability to bear children, represents human helplessness, which is to be joyfully overcome by the power of God. Despair gives way to praise. Zechariah, whose big day is suddenly turned upside down by the appearance of the angel, represents human slowness to accept God's power to change things, even though he apparently had been praying for precisely this outcome. And contrasts, which we're going to see next week, with Mary's, mother of Jesus, ready acceptance of a similar challenge to faith when we get to Luke chapter 1, verse 38. So you've got Israel, there's silence, they're waiting, and the silence has been broken with a guy who's going to come, and he's going to be Elijah. He's not going to be the guy, but he's going to be the guy with the guy. He's going to announce the way, he's going to prepare the way for Jesus Christ, the ultimate redemption of Israel, the ultimate redemption of all people, who's going to come, live his life, teach, which we're going to be embraced with for the next couple years or so, and he's going to die on a cross, redeeming not only just people of Jewish faith, Jewish race, but all people who bend their knee to him. Then you have Zechariah, who's been praying and waiting and has gone through life, both for the redemption of his nation and for children. And somewhere he just kind of even gave up on that. I would imagine. He just gave up on it. And the amazing thing to me, and the thing that I take away from this is this. This is the very thing that he was praying for. The answer is right before him, and he stumbles into what the passage says is because you didn't believe. It's like, well, I was just praying for that. And then you have Elizabeth. Elizabeth completely takes the whole thing in stride. Whole thing. Okay? So far, if you're keeping score at home on your gender, male 0, female 1. Okay? Luke loves women. He does. Elizabeth is a hero. She just allows this incredible thing to happen and acknowledges that it came from God. Let me ask you this as we close today. This amazing story. Does God seem silent to you? Does God seem like he's just a million miles away? Are you waiting on that sun of righteousness? I think every one of us in some way, shape, or form, that's very true. I think for some of us, I know we had the suffering dialogue yesterday, life has gone difficult. Carol and I were praying for you all and others, and I just was moved to pray, God, there's circumstances, yes, but more than that, especially being influenced by this text, would you just give them your presence? That's what they really need. And secondly, are you ready for him to answer? Some of you have prayed recently and said, God, I desperately want a heart that's after you. And almost immediately life difficulties have come in. And you come back to God and go, what's the deal? What's the deal, God? I didn't ask for that. You almost wish Gabriel could say, you're done talking. You stop. Are you ready for his answer? Let's pray together.